Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Midweek Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on X, Rumble, also on YouTube and Facebook Live and BitChute as well as the audio streams. Thank you so much for joining us for this midweek edition. And there's been a lot going on. Obviously, we're going to be talking a little bit about Donald Trump's address to the joint sessions, but also about Ukraine. And Europe is in absolute war mode at the moment. They are taking up the mantle. Some say this is a Fourth Reich out of Brussels. I am not being flippant there, and I am being absolutely dead serious. They're talking about allocating upwards of €1 trillion for, quote, defense spending to deter the Russian threat. So we don't like the sound of any of this, and this is a reaction by Europe to the breakdown in communication between Donald Trump, the United States, and Vladimir Zelensky, the president for life in Kiev, who has still got the begging bowl out. Looks like he's got some takers in Europe. We're going to talk about this, plus another trend, which is the sort of female caucus of warhawks in Europe, who are incredibly aggressive in their rhetoric, and it looks like they want war. We'll talk about who they are. We'll play some of the clips of some of the statements they've made. It's absolutely insane. I know some of you are familiar with a lot of this, but many of you might not be. To help us to navigate some of this conversation, we got a couple of great people from our team here who are going to join us right now. We're joined by Freddie Ponton. He is an independent journalist and researcher for 21stcenturywire.com. Freddie's also done a great piece recently about the Nord Stream pipeline, which is making waves, no pun intended, about the NATO lake and submarine activity during Baltops 22. Freddie is on the line with us, as well as the political editor of the Pulse.today, Basil Valentine, also on the live link. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this midweek wire.
It's great to be with you, Patrick. Thank you.
So, guys, I can start off with a little bit of a primer, but I want to go to each of you just to get I want to hear, what is your impression of the fallout from the Trump-Zelensky meltdown in the Oval Office last Friday, and then the European reaction. I want to get both of your takes on that before we go to a couple of video clips from what we're calling the Euro coven in Europe, the new war Congress that has appeared very disturbingly in Europe. But let's go to Freddie first. Freddie, what are your impressions on the breakdown of Trump and Zelensky, the reaction from Europe? Let me get your take first. Go ahead, Fred.
Well, like everybody, I watched the video and I watched this incident. I think it's a first. I was born in the 60s. I've never seen something like this. So I find it shocking, and it's certainly not helping people to trust any aspect of our current governments, whether it's in Europe or in America. Now, my view on it is that this is something that should have happened behind the curtains. This is not a show. This is not something that should have been advertised, and it's regrettable that it occurs, because it's not benefiting anyone and it's not reassuring. That's my first impression. Now, on the other side, on a European level, I think it was a real shocker. Nobody expected that it will go that bad. A lot of media, mainstream media, have called it a trap, if you will, a guet-apens, where Zelensky was basically awaited by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, and basically brought into a conversation which ultimately resulted in a rather uncomfortable situation for Zelensky. But this is not my reading personally. My reading was pretty much that this is something that was a little bit planned, if you will. And I think there is an intention from the Trump administration to send a very clear and strong message that Trump was elected on the basis that it will bring peace to the world. And that his first action will be obviously to put an end to this conflict in Ukraine. So that's really, I think, quite obviously unequivocal, and he has made that very clear. The way, the manners, and how it was done is debatable, of course. But all in all, I think that Europe got the message, and I believe the panic that we are currently seeing in Europe is just an extension of this unfortunate meeting.
And over to you, Basil Valentine, political editor at the Pulse today. Basil, what was your reaction from last Friday, and how about the British reaction, the European reaction from that fallout? Go ahead.
Well, initially I was thrilled, I must admit, to see a world leader finally send Zelensky packing. The meeting ended very abruptly, with Zelensky effectively being kicked out of the White House unceremoniously. Not the sort of thing you normally see in international relations at all. But things are moving so fast. That's one of the things with the Trump regime. They don't let the grass grow under their feet. At the beginning of the week, Zelensky said that peace with Russia was very, very far away. That angered Trump. But then just in the last couple of days, Zelensky has written to Trump saying he's ready for peace talks. And Trump referenced that letter in his speech to Congress yesterday, saying he'd had a beautiful letter from Zelensky, who's now ready to talk peace. So a week is a long time in politics, as they say. The European reaction has been hysterical, entirely irrational. Why on earth Britain, at a time when it's claiming to be impoverished, suddenly needs to start ramping up defense spending makes no sense at all. Russia poses no immediate threat to us. This government are fond of telling us all how utterly broke the country is, and they're going to make deep cuts to welfare services, to the disabled, unable to pay the winter fuel allowance to pensioners, yet somehow suddenly billions are going to be made available for defense. And to add to the ludicrousness of it, this is being presented as some kind of engine for economic growth. It's A-level economics that spending on military hardware or on defense in general is the least effective way of refloating an economy if government wants to spend money. They should be cutting taxes to the poorest in society, because the poorest spend most of their additional income on goods and services. They should be investing in public works that actually benefit ordinary people, whether it's building railways or roads or hospitals or schools. Money spent on military equipment does nothing for the wider economy. The multiplier effect is about 0.08%. So that's another lie, simple as that. But, you know, we're used to endless lies from this government. Disappointingly, this has let the whole crisis has let Starmer off the hook. He's far and away the most unpopular prime minister at this stage of his premiership since polling began, beating even Margaret Thatcher, who was horrendously unpopular. And what got her out of trouble? The Falklands War. If it hadn't been for the Falklands War, she would have been kicked out in 1983, whether by Labour or what was then the Liberal Social Democrat Alliance. However, the Falklands came to her rescue. The polls turned around, and suddenly she won 3 more elections. So is war going to be Starmer's saviour? We certainly hope not. He's an absolutely wretched individual, but somehow by clothing himself in all this bellicose talk, he's been able to represent himself as some kind of bulwark against the irrational Donald Trump.
And it's funny you mentioned Keir Starmer. Politico, Basil, ran with this. So we'll bring this up on screen here. This is what they're saying. Keir Starmer, the unlikely leader of the free world. I mean, quite something in terms of headlines there. And there he is himself. This is the new leader of the free world. He's really taking the bull by the horns, and he is going to stick it to those Russians. Let me tell you, Basil, Keir is ready to bring Britain to war once again. channeling his inner Churchill. What do you think about this headline?
Delusional. I mean, he's got no leadership skills at all, just simply pushing back against Trump's peace overtures doesn't make him a leader of anything. But in the absence of anybody else on the stage, then I suppose you can frame him as that by default, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to last. I mean, he's an absolutely wretched individual, no original ideas of his own, 100% the asset of the United Kingdom national security state. And all the arrows in terms of his policy are pointing in the wrong direction. People didn't vote for this. They don't want it. They don't want him. But of course, we can't stop corporate media like that trying to paint him in the best possible light. They've been doing that for years.
Okay. And Freddie, Ursula von der Leyen still somehow is the head of the European Commission. Somehow, she's somehow in charge of the war effort. She's the leader of Europe. This is like the nightmare that everybody envisioned, that the EU would become a Fourth Reich. And I'd like to say we're joking here, Freddie. I really would. But, she has basically come and said, we'll bring this up on screen here. I know you've been doing some research on this as well, Freddie, but she's talking about just basically rearming Europe. I think that's the term that Ursula has been using here. We'll bring this up on screen and have a look at this piece here. We published at 21wire. But I mean, what is this all about, Freddie? What exactly? Where's the money going to come from on this, Freddie? She's talking 800 billion euros. This is like the U.S. defense budget, obviously stretched out over a period of time. Where exactly is this money coming from, Freddie?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, she's the head of the coalition of the willing, so that's an interesting term that has been used during the last session in London with Keir Starmer and 19 other so-called European leaders. And that's probably the first thing we should tackle, because I think it's important to remind people that Europe is made of 27 countries. So when 19 European so-called leaders gathered in London under the directions of Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen trying to find a plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, we need to remind ourselves that amongst these 19 European leaders, there was at least 3 or 4 of them that are completely unelected people, which bring down the total to 15 people that actually had legitimacy around the table. So we're talking about half of Europe at this meeting discussing a potential ceasefire, and then looking at discussing European boots on the ground in Ukraine with the French and the British and anybody else willing to join this coalition of the willing. So it's really unrealistic, as Basil just mentioned. It's just simply does not make sense. I call that a political, suicidal move, if you will. It's a sabotage, because really there is no way, there is no money that can be raised today in Britain or in France or anywhere else that could really sustain a real war effort, an immediate war effort against Russia. And then putting boots on the ground in Ukraine will just basically end up having British and French troops and perhaps even German troops, if they decide to go, being killed on the front, because it's a red line. And I think Putin has been very clear on that. I think that there's no way that NATO troops will be on Ukrainian soil. So that I don't know how this is going to affect the negotiations or even the peace deal, but it's all unrealistic. Now, with regards to your question, Patrick, as far as this initiative, the rearm initiatives, which represent an extensive 800 billion strategy, which has primarily been designed to enhance Europe's defense capabilities and strategic response. The idea here is to really increase global uncertainties and, of course, the recent halt of the U.S. military assistance to Ukraine by Donald Trump. So they've basically outlined their strategy. It has been mainly covered by the coverage by the mainstream media about how this defense spending is going to be gathered. Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending. And we're going to see that this is something that is going to be part of a much larger, much broader communications. I remind that tonight, Emmanuel Macron in France will be addressing the nation regarding the summit, the European Council summit on defense strategy and spending, as well on the Ukrainian issues. And this is all going to be part of a European communication plan. So like in the US, we sure going to have some European leaders basically speaking from the same paper sheets, if you will. They're going to have the same kind of narrative that's going to tell us that it's good for us, it's economically friendly, and it's going to be really a boost, and it's really about being independent from the United States. It's about Europe and time for Europe to take its own destiny when Europe has not done that for the past 50 years. So it's all surreal, really. And as I said, this is not just a consensus of European countries coming together. This is just a small cabal which have gone onto the neocon bandwagon coming from the United States, hoping that they could benefit and profit from this kind of burst of energy and influx of money coming from the United States, which suddenly come to an halt, and they simply don't know how to deal with it. So that's where von der Leyen is. And of course, the European Investment Bank and all this outfit that has been set up over the years to boost the defense spending in Europe is going to be part of that discussions. And a lot of people are going to discover vehicles and investment vehicles that they've never heard of. But if you look at the defense numbers between 2005 and 2024, everything becomes very clear. It's very clear that this has not been something that is happening today, but we can clearly see the numbers have increased exponentially, over the past 3 years, especially 2023 and 2024. Just record level of spending in the European defense budgets, and nations have been squeezed to the point that it might be politically dangerous to ask more of the European citizen.
Well, I hope Freddie's right about that, because the way it's being presented as somehow economically beneficial to Europe to spend all this money on defense is really mendacious. As I said, think of what you could do in terms of improving railways or sanitation, power generation. With 800 billion, you could do an enormous amount. You could transform Europe with that kind of money. You spend it on military hardware, most of which, of course, is never used, never can be used. Hopefully, it doesn't need to be used. So that's really, really disappointing that, of course, the corporate media aren't picking them up on that big, fat, whopping lie, because it is a big, fat, whopping lie. It's not going to do anything for Europe's economy at all. Of course, some people say this is all because, politicians are in the pockets of defense contractors, the military industrial complex, which Starmer's even referenced as wanting to boost extraordinary stuff. But there's more to it than that. They must believe, to some degree, their own nonsense about Russia wanting to advance further militarily. All this stuff about if he's not stopped in Ukraine, then Poland and Hungary and Romania will be next. I mean, do they really believe that? One can only hope that at some future peace deal between the United States and Russia, it becomes clear that that isn't going to happen and all this insanity melts away. But, there's something driving the likes of von der Leyen and the other witches in the coven, Mette Frederiksen, the Danish Prime Minister, who said peace is more dangerous than war. I mean, we're dealing with mad women here. It seems only Meloni has got even an ounce of sense. She said yesterday that she doesn't want Italian troops to be part of this coalition of the willing. Of course, a phrase recycled from George Bush II, 2003, when he couldn't get the second UN resolution, if you remember that, authorizing war. So that became a coalition of the willing, which basically became Britain and the United States. Here we are 20 years later, nothing's been learned. In fact, I would say that it's because nothing was learned. And of course, there were never any repercussions for the cheerleaders for that illegal war that we're in this situation now, because or, all the hawks in the think tanks and embedded in Brussels and everywhere else haven't gone away. They've just found a new casus belli and a new enemy to target in the shape of Vladimir Putin, with Saddam being out of the way. If Putin was out of the way, they'd find somebody else, but that absolutely dreadful creature on screen now. Well, all we can say is that at least we in Britain are no longer in any way represented by her. But it's worth noting, this talk of the European army, that was all dismissed as paranoia, but that's very much the direction we're headed in at the moment. And the fact that Britain is no longer a member of the European Union doesn't seem to make any difference. They're talking about new defense alliances and,
Oh no, it does. It does because Britain is opting into the European collective defense, and
that's what I mean. So the fact that we're not in the European Union isn't stopping us opting into this European collective defense.
No. Listen, that's what's coming in the next general election. Keir Starmer moving Britain back into Europe. This will be the showdown with the Farage coalition there with Reform and Tories. The European question will be back for an association agreement. That's what our sources are telling us in Westminster. But you mentioned the coven.
And doubtless Starmer will try and portray it as unpatriotic to oppose, because of course we're faced by this monster in Putin, and anything other than joining this new European defense coalition is effectively as bad as Neville Chamberlain. It's appeasement, all the nonsense that we hear about the 1930s all over again.
Yeah, it's the Sudetenland all over again. So here's the head of the coven. You mentioned the coven, Ursula von der Leyen here, Darth Helmet herself. More weapons, more war, more death. Here she is.
So if member states would increase their defense spending by 1.5% of GDP on average, this could create fiscal space of close to 650 billion euros over a period of 4 years. The second proposal will be a new instrument. It will provide 150 billion euros of loans to member states for defense investment. This is about basically spending better and spending together. And we're talking about pan-European capabilities, domains, like, for example, air and missile defense.
Okay. Freddie, it's about spending more and spending together. She's talking about debt. She is talking about piling debt onto all of the European member states. Freddie, am I reading this wrong?
Well, it looked like her speech was prepared by the European Investment Bank. Which she talked about new instruments of loans, again, on condition that the money will revitalize the sectors and all that kind of thing. So it's all about basically presented it as an economic opportunities. But she's also obviously have to consider suspending the Stability Pact. We saw that in Germany, which, part of the discussions of raising the budget or the budget space, we should say, involve office complying with international regulations and law. And that is going to become a major problem as well. So they want to loosen this environment, this financial environment, so allowing all the countries to go overboard, if you will, because it's completely an overboard operation here to allow raising these funds, whether it's through an instrument of loan or whether it's going to be by increasing their defense spending 1.5% of the GDP. So the whole thing is just it's a vaudeville. It's simply a charade, because I don't think, as I say, there is no money. If we look at the budgetary situation of Europe, it's a disaster. And if we look at the budgets, that's what at the parliament in France at the moment, we're asking for the numbers. How much money have we actually allocated not only to Europe, but how much money we've also allocated directly to Ukraine, and how much weapons have we sent there. So all that needs to be budgeted. It needs to be reported, documented, and then people can understand exactly how much effort already has been put into this in this particular support of Ukraine, and is it worth it today to go above board and put basically everybody onto a loan? It's not by 150 billion euros, but we all know these loans will obviously get extensions, and the next thing we know, we're going to be, as she said, around $500 to $800 billion. What are we fighting for? What's in there for us? And I think that nobody can really understand. Are we fighting for democracy in one of the most corrupt countries in the world? Or what is it that we're doing? Is it just a money laundering machines that we are keep on fitting in and someone is coining, and it's certainly not us?
Oh, they want to turn you, all of you European member states, into Ukraine, basically in hoc to the military-industrial complex and the banks, basically. Because you know what's funny? They're going to remove the budget restriction at the Brussels approval level to add more deficit to compensate for to give space for military spending. Do you know what that means as well? That means they're going to be cutting back on other programs, Freddie.
Oh, of course.
That means austerity, Freddie.
Yes.
Freddie, that's healthcare, that's social programs, that's pensions, that's retirement, that's fuel subsidies for the elderly. I mean,
look, it's very simple to understand it. You know, if you look at the big picture, what you're saying is the deconstruction of systems in general. If you look at all the reports from 2009, 2008 onward, it's about how we're going to change the system, whether it's financial, whether it's the health system, whether it's the public system, whether it's the financial systems, whether it's the defense systems. All these systems are up for review. And ideally, they want to sell it to you as something that is positive, but it's very hard to do because the money is running out, the debt is increasing, and people are getting less service. I mean, in France, I'm giving you a very realistic example. But if you want to have let's say, an appointment with a medical specialist, a surgeon, or someone that is specialized in a certain discipline, you might have to wait up to 6 months, sometimes even a year, to see that guy. You know, that's how bad it got. But yet we can find and we can loosen our budgetary space to accommodate Ukraine, where many people don't even know where to put it on the map. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And people are suffering. It's not, as I said, Basil mentioned earlier, with this 800 billion, we could do so much more. Yes, you know, if you go back to my Nord Stream investigation, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying, how many people have been affected by this crime? How many business? More than 10,000 last time I counted. I tracked them down. 10,000 business. It's not a small measure. We're talking about a lot of people putting the, you know, basically going down because they cannot afford any longer these huge electricity bills, and the logistic chain has just gone completely crazy. The prices are simply unaffordable for small, even to medium-sized business. And that's just France. So can you imagine if you multiply that across the European spectrum, you have hundreds of thousands of businesses that have struggled. And then, of course, not to mention, you know, the electricity bill for just elders, you know, old people that needs to be warmer than we do. We actives, we do find that's fine. But the people that are stuck in front of the TV, they need to have extra heaters, and that you have to pay for that. And the bills go to thousands of euros sometimes. It's crazy. And people already in a very, you know, kind of a modern economy, G7, you know, people find it hard, and they're starting to say, I can afford to heat myself up. When people are talking about spending 800 billion for a country that is not even part of Europe, not part of NATO, not part of anything. So
it sounds to me, Freddie, that you're just not appreciative of who your new leader is of Europe. And as Mette Frederiksen said, the Prime Minister of Denmark, this is the hero of Europe here. And he is holding back Vladimir Putin from overrunning the Rhineland and into the French plains and all the way to Normandy and to Calais and Basil. The next thing, the Russians will be at your doorstep if we don't stop them in Ukraine. So you need to show your gratefulness and pay homage and patronage to Zelensky. I don't understand. Why are you and Freddie so unappreciative of this great hero who's come on to the scene, Vladimir Zelensky? I don't get it. What am I missing?
Well,
here,
with
guys?
any luck, he might be gone soon. I mean, you know, there is talk of getting rid of him because he's an obstacle to peace. Sooner that happens, the better. But for Europe, it's a bleak outlook, because what I fear is that not only will welfare programs be cut back, but we'll be looking at things like more privatization of the National Health Service and the French equivalent, because, this will be deemed too expensive now. So we're going to have to start selling it off in bits, more privatization to fund this war. All the arrows pointing in the wrong direction, as well as just simply engendering a climate of totally unnecessary, fabricated fear. Europe should be thriving culturally and economically. There's no reason why it shouldn't. But this is, just generally driving society in the wrong direction. It's worth remembering, too, that, the richest 5% are paying far less in tax than they did 50 years ago. Believe it or not, wealth has been created over the last 25 years. It's just that very little of it has found its way down to middle and lower income people. We could do so much more if we simply tax the rich. If they want a war, let them pay for it. I saw a meme on social media the other day which said, war is where young men who don't know each other and don't hate each other go to fight for a tiny elite who do know each other and who hate each other, and that's about the size of it.
Well, you guys mentioned earlier, I think, Basil, you used the word coven here. Let's bring up on stage. Now, this was in the New York Post. This was a couple of months ago. And saying, meet the tough women leaders taking on Vladimir Putin. You see Ursula von der Leyen, and then you see next to her Mia Sandu. I think that's the president of Moldova. And then Kalia Kallas, as you rightly say, Basil. Callous by name.
Callous by nature.
I love that. I've borrowed that a few times. And then Sonia Marin, the crazed former Finnish leader. She's out now. And then Annalena Baerbock. As well. She's the outgoing German Green Party foreign minister. What a debacle that is. We're calling these the Euro coven, basically. And what is it with these warmongering women, guys, that we were told, like growing up during the Cold War, that it's because of the men, it's because of the patriarchy. If only there were women in charge, Freddie.
That's right. Gentle women who were more interested
nurturing.
In peace,
The nurturing matriarchs would save the world from war, Freddie. That's what we were told growing up. The problem was men and, the hormones, the alpha males. And here you have the biggest warhawks imaginable, backed up by a slew of beta males in suits. Freddie, this is a disaster. And I'm here to testify that maybe women should not be in charge of military decisions. I know that's a chauvinistic comment. It's meant to be controversial, but look at the results. These women want to bring us to the brink of World War III, Freddie. It's like they're playing a game of Risk. They're talking about Putin like he's, Kalia Kallas, Freddie, said Russia needs to be broken up into 10 different parts. I mean, and then we need to fight China, she said. What is wrong with these women, Freddie?
Well, the first thing is what's wrong with them has nothing to do with the fact that they are women. There's nothing to do with it. That's the first thing I want to get out of the way, because I don't like to jump into that easy conclusion. Are they women? No, that's not what I want to say, because there's some great women out there. I met many great women, great leadership, extremely intelligent and sophisticated. But that's not what we're dealing here with. These are people that have been appointed. They all come from a very kind of a highly educated background. They all went to higher school, apart from Giorgia Meloni, which is the most ill-educated of the bunch. But they all went through the same school, so they all been formatted, if you will. And what's interesting is to see the advancements of a lot of leaders from the Baltic Sea. So, as you mentioned, Estonia, former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, Vice President of the EU Commissions. Now, I'm not sure how she got the job. But clearly not based on skills on leaderships and understanding of foreign policies. This is someone that is extremely abrupt. It's got that really roughness of Eastern Europe politics that tends to be, even Poland is not as rough as she is. That's very clear. You could see the Polish administration coming very quickly after the horrible encounter between Zelensky and Trump, and saying that we will not going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. This is not something we prepared to do. But Latvia, Denmark, and all these countries seems to be very keen on doing it. But the one to watch is really Giorgia Meloni, because she doesn't have this educated background. However, she is really the person, and you can see a huge article on the Time exploring how Giorgia Meloni becomes really the person that everybody wants to be associated with. And the only reason why is because she's the only one that's speaking on behalf of the South. All the rest is from the Baltics and the north part of Europe, if you will, and they're all really on the same page. And then for me, as far as I'm concerned, Freddie Henningsen is probably the hardliner, if you will, but she seems very unstable. And I keep on having this picture of her going around Europe, just literally the day after the Nord Stream sabotage. She was going to London, then she'd come to Europe, to Brussels, and then she went to see Macron. And she was all over the place, like acting like a crazy person, instead of staying home and reassuring her people and saying, look, there is something that's going on here. We're going to investigate and go to the bottom of that. Now, she was going all around, she needed to be seen, but she was out of the country. And then, of course, Callas, I don't need to speak about the women's. Even Rubio doesn't want to sit down with her. That said it all.
Rubio blew her off. And just bringing it back up on stage, you mentioned Ursula von der Leyen seems to have a new second in command of this unsightly coven of warhawks here. It's Mette Frederiksen. This is the Danish prime minister, very much resembling Hillary Clinton, by the way, or a slightly younger Hillary Clinton, Basil, but she seems to be the most aggressive now. She's Ursula's kind of number two there in pushing Europe towards World War III, and quite shamelessly. I'm going to play a clip here, and I want to get your comment on this, both Basil and Freddie. And this is Mette Frederiksen here. We're going to bring her up on the screen. And she's made a couple of, it's just unbelievable, the things this woman is saying here in public. It's pretty breathtaking. We'll bring her up on stage here. This is the first one here I want to share with you guys. And then the speech in front of the round table in Kiev is just something for the history books. But here she is.
And if we allow Russia to win the war, I'm sorry to say it directly to all of you, he will continue and they will continue. And maybe we will even give them a better situation than today, because if we end this war now with some kind of a frozen conflict, a ceasefire, it will give Russia the possibility to return to Russia, to mobilize more funds, people, and maybe to attack another country in Europe.
maybe to attack another country in Europe. Yeah. Crazy.
It will give the opportunity to Russia to go back to Russia. Yeah. That sounds like a good idea. Russia never left Russia, first of all. This woman is just simply a disaster. From a political point of view, from someone that is supposed to be highly educated, that's the best Europe can provide. These people are not there because they're good. They're there because they support an agenda. They've just been placed there. And not because they're women, simply because they go along and they need someone for the fallout, because this whole charade, this old castle of lie is going to really fall on their head. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard fall, because the reality on the ground is no one going into Ukraine. Nobody put boots on the ground in Ukraine unless it is prepared to declare World War III. That's the bottom line. And if they don't understand that, these people are absolutely crazy, because Europe has no manufacturing capabilities, absolutely ill prepared for any war effort. Nobody is war hardened in Europe. We haven't fought any wars, a couple of special operations here and there, but a proper military operation of this magnitude, no one is prepared for that. Nobody wants it, not in the populations at least. Let's remember ourselves that most of our government in Europe, they do not enjoy the majority like Vladimir Putin in Russia is enjoying. Over 90% of the population voted for him. Here, Macron, 23%. Maybe you get a 26% in Germany. And it's the same for Starmer and all these guys. They've not been, they don't have the public support. There's a kind of illegitimacy about these people. And this is a cabal that is reckless and dangerous for our own security. So the threat in Europe is not a Russian threat. They are the threat, these people.
I saved the best one for last. I want to get Basil's comment. This is the piece de la resistance of warmongering, and they added some classical mood music to the background just to get you into the mood. But check this out.
You have defended not only your own country but all of Europe, and I believe that none of us present in this room are able to put into words how grateful we are. But then we can show it in action. And therefore, I have the three key messages today. Firstly, I strongly urge every European country to increase support for Ukraine. Not tomorrow, but today. Remove all self-imposed red lines, scale up military and financial assistance, and support production directly in Ukraine. Conditions for peace are to be set through strength. And I think that is the single most important task for Europe right now. Secondly, a ceasefire without a sustainable peace will cause a lot of danger to all of us. It will give Russia room to rebuild, to rearm, and to relaunch an attack on Ukraine or another European country. I have never believed that this war is primarily about Ukraine. You are paying the price for it, but this war is about Russia. It's about the imperial dreams, and therefore I find it very difficult to trust Putin and to trust Russia. And it goes without saying that nothing should be negotiated without Ukraine, not only at the table, but in the center of the table, of course. Thirdly, we need to ensure Ukraine has a real and
I'm going to break out. You're muted there. I'm going to break out in hives if we have to listen to any more of her.
Just for the historical record, we wanted to play this clip through because, so we look back and say, how did World War III begin? We can lay the blame at the feet of Mette Frederiksen.
I don't know if we'll get that chance. If World War III begins, it might be all over very, very quickly, Patrick.
Okay. Strong security guarantee. NATO membership is, of course, the strongest security guarantee. It is the easiest way forward. It's the cheapest way forward. I know that some allies are against this. And therefore, I ask the question, if we cannot give you membership of NATO, and I think it's the only way forward, then we have to find another way to provide Ukraine with a clear, long-term security guarantee. Let me just conclude by saying that the best things about heroes is that they always win at the end. And if they aren't winning, then it's not the end. I said to you 3 years ago that Denmark stands with you all the way, and we will never go away from that point of view. We have to stand with Ukraine, and we have to stand with our continent. Therefore, I think we have to scale up as Europeans. We have to speed up to be able to protect ourselves and deter when it comes to Russia. And 3% will not be enough. It's simply not enough. My guess is that we have a couple of months to take all necessary decisions. Otherwise, we'll be too late. And being too late cannot be the conclusion. So it's time to stand up for Ukraine, and it's time to stand up for Europe. Slava Ukraine.
What's wrong with these people?
Slava Ukraini, so uttering Ukrainian nationalist slogan at the end, Basil, every single trope was rolled into that little tearjerker by Mette Frederiksen. Unbelievable. And it just made me think, what side did I'm ashamed of my Danish heritage, actually, when I see that. I don't know what to say, honestly.
Yeah, I hope I never have to sit through that again, to be honest. This Euro coven, they all seem to come out of a sort of central casting as well. The earlier clip of von der Leyen, notice the shade of royal blue that her jacket is, which is very much the royal blue of the Ukrainian flag with gold buttons. In fact, she often effectively dresses up in a Ukrainian flag. I'm also extremely dubious, having spoken to colleague Peli Neroth-Taylor, actually about the validity of the elections of some of these people. The callous creature, for example, grave doubts about the validity of the elections that saw her, brought into power over there in the Baltic before she became, of course, the now unelected European foreign policy chief. And, when you sort of add in the propaganda effect, quite apart from anything, any malfeasance at the ballot box, then, these people, above all, are not representative of the European people or their wishes at all. But somehow, I think that the shadow government, by fronting up these supposedly agreeable-looking women, that will somehow make their outrageous ideas seem more reasonable to members of the public, you see, because women, well, they can't be crazed warhawks because they're women. Polling suggests that in general, female members of the population are more in favor of peace. But the Brookings Institute have published a study recently which indicates that when in positions of power, in order to combat gender stereotypes, they adopt more hawkish positions. Hence, you end up with the collection of iron, now I'm pleased to say, rusted ladies like Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir, and Indira Gandhi. And of course, in the United States, the likes of Madeleine Albright, Condi Rice, Hillary Clinton, that they adopt more aggressive policies than their male counterparts because they don't want to appear weak. Geraldine Ferraro was the only vice presidential candidate prior to our own dreadful Kamala Harris to have ever run before, and she was plagued by questions about whether or not the Russians would regard her as weak and take advantage of her. And of course, Nikki Haley is just about the most hawkish politician on the American stage.
The joint session Donald Trump gave to Congress last night was eventful, but I picked up this, I spotted this because we see everything here. That's Chuck Schumer, and he is one of the other members of the coven in the U.S. Senate there. And look at the lapel pin. Just do a zoom in on that. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Stars and Stripes and the Ukrainian flag. So dual loyalty still with many members of Congress and Senate in the United States. And it just harkens back to this regrettable scene in December of 2022 when Zelensky took over our House of Government. And there you see Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris unfurling a Ukrainian flag signed by members of the Azov Battalion in front of our government and our country. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, this was the lowest point, to me, one of the lowest points in American history, even worse than Netanyahu addressing Congress and then shouting Slava Ukraini. And your final thoughts, guys, before we wrap up. I mean, I was hoping that this situation wasn't going to spiral out of control any worse than it has been the last 3 years, but it looks like we're still in it. Freddie, go ahead.
Well, 2 days ago, Donald Trump posted on, I think it was on Truth Socials, that there will be a big revelation and that he will tell it like it is. And I think this is what we need. We need to see exactly what is this Ukrainian money laundering scheme, because there's no doubt any longer that this was a money laundering scheme. But what we need to see is where the money that went to Ukraine, where did it go after Ukraine? We need to see exactly who the people who are the benefactors of this money, because some people have got extremely rich with this Ukrainian war. And of course, they're wearing a pin. Of course, they are wearing and, holding these flags, in the Congress or in the Senate. These people have absolutely no shame, because this is all about money. This is all about, getting backhands, and they're going to support it because this is their little piggy bag, and they don't want it to stop because the money is so good. That's what it is. And I hope Trump and his team are going to go and put these people, in front of a a jury, because these people need to be part of an official inquiries. We need to know exactly how come all this money has disappeared. And it's the same for Europe. It's not just on the United States. Europe needs to get a concrete report on the allocation of this budget and where this money went, because we already know and suspect during the COVID-19 that a lot of money was distributed and it didn't go in the right pockets, certainly not. But I think is what we are looking at in Ukraine is exactly the same. So that's my view on it. We need public inquiries to know exactly where this dirty money is going.
Basil, final thoughts before we break?
Well, the latest is that just today the US has paused some intelligence sharing with Ukraine as part of a broader push to force Zelensky back to the negotiating table. And the word coming out of Paris is that there are plans for Macron to travel to Washington with, yes, Keir Starmer and Zelensky in a bid to convince Donald Trump of the need for security guarantees for Ukraine as part of the ceasefire talks. So we'll see what happens there. But, things have been moving very quickly and doubtless they will continue to do so. Let's hope they stop going, though, in the wrong direction where Europe is concerned. I mean, this nonsense that somehow ramping up defense spending is going to do anything other than be a disaster for the economy. As Freddie said, there's no manufacturing capability in Europe. Therefore, all that's going to happen is that a lot of overpriced weaponry from the United States will be bought by Europe, of no economic benefit at all.
Well, one last thing I would like to add to that, Basil, is that
be very, very quick, very quick.
Very quick, Patrick. The number of troops that Europe can gather, right, is but if we can make it 100,000 soldiers, you'd be a miracle. Right? You're facing an army of 800,000 people on the other side. Nothing is making sense. This is not happening. This is not happening. They wanted for 4 years to spend money and to increase this budget for 4 years. That is the end of Ursula von der Leyen's mandate. Yeah, that's food for thought.
Yeah.
Thank you, Freddie Ponton, independent journalist, contributor, 21st Century Wire. Basil Valentine, political editor at thepulse.today. Do follow both of them. They're both doing extraordinary work, and we really appreciate your comments on these earth-shaking events this week, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
And there they go. That's all we have time for. It's a shorter midweek wire than we have done in the past. But again, really appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be gearing up for the Sunday Wire, which will be coming up very, very soon, a couple of days. Hopefully we have something special for you there. Follow us at 21stcenturywire.com. Support our work as well. We're having a winter fundraising drive at the moment. We're in the final week. If you like what we do, you like the work that we're doing, do consider donating or subscribing and becoming a member at 21wire.tv. Listen, you guys, that's all we've got time for today. I hope to see you very soon. And for myself, your host, Patrick Henningsen, we'll see you on Sunday. All the best.